Um, First of all, I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but when I go and do presentations or things like that, I become a little antsy and anxious and everything. And over the years, something that's touched my heart, and it happened to me today, there's a song, long time ago, a song called "You Are My Special Angel." And whenever I'm struggling over anything pertaining to my dad, who is who I'm going to speak about today, that song comes on. Well, I started from Grove City, got in the car, started it up, and what came on the radio? "You Are My Special Angel." Of course, I burst into tears. I called my husband, said, "You're not going to believe this." Now, he has been with me through all this. So I feel that I am here not only honoring my dad, but I feel my dad is smiling down on me as I proceed. So thank you all for coming. This is a great opportunity to learn and to know and keep real history alive. One thing I'd like to talk about before I even start with my dad is the people here on the board. They welcomed me like family. And I put together this crazy little thing here, so bear with me. Here, I'm a photographer. I've been a photographer for 20 years, but in my book, I have this picture of Abby, and this is myself and my youngest son. And long time ago, I learned about Abby being at the Butler, not being paid, being the welcomer down there. And I said to my son, we need to go down there. I need you to meet him. Mm-hmm. So we went down there, and Abby treated me like a daughter when he found out what all my dad went through. So anyway, I'm here to recognize Chris for what she's done with Abby. And of course, this is a picture, Chris, a long time ago. I can't remember where we were, but this is Chris and I at one of the events here that we had through the library. Another one I wanted to share was Joe Vaughter. I walked in and I saw Joe's son, and after looking at this picture, I said, "Oh my goodness, you look just like your dad." This was taken at a convention we had in Pittsburgh, and Joe happened to be in the 803rd Aviation where my dad was too, out of Pittsburgh. So, and I caught this little I'm crazy, I'm a photographer, so I take pictures all the time. I took a picture of your dad's badge, which stated everything about him. So I wanted to recognize Mr. Vader and also Joe that's here today. Now this is, and I want to tell a quick story here about, my mind just went playing crazy, Mr. Jackford. Many years ago, and I can't remember which time it was, Jim was very kind to write all these letters to the different Japanese companies who used our labor, our POWs as slave labor. And the group of Japanese came here from the Mitsubishi company, and Jim had invited me to come down. The only reason he knew about me is 2 weeks before that I brought my book down and I said, "Would you like to put this in your library?" And he called and said, "Peggy, would you like to come in 2 weeks?" Mm-hmm. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "The Japanese CEO of Mitsubishi is coming, and I'd like for you to come and meet him." And I said, I don't think I can do that. Well, my arm was twisted, and I did come. I'm glad I came because it made me a different feeling toward the Japanese than I was carrying along in my life. But anyway, Mr. Jackford met me at the door. This dear man, I think at that time he was in his beginning 90s or something. He met me at the door, we introduced each other, and he said to me, "Peggy, I want to tell you something. What's in the past is the past. We're moving on for now." And I thought, if this former POW can have that attitude, I better get my act together, which I did, and I'm ever so grateful to being invited here to do this, and for Mr. Jafford. at that particular time here, and I put these pictures together. These are pictures when the Japanese were there, and Mr. Jackford was there shaking hands with them and everything like that. And there is Mary Kay there. There is the professor there. There is Jim there. But there's this Japanese crew that was there. They were recording this to take back to Japan. But I cherish this. I think this means a lot to what we're doing here. And last but not least is dear Jim. Jim did not know me from Adam, and he has helped me a lot. He helped me find my dad's name in the Kobe house, and he found some other things. He's a wealth of information, and he's a great guy. This was, I can't remember when this was, Jim. Was this when we walked and pretending it was a
Yeah, it was the first one we did.
The first one we did?
Yeah.
This, and there's the professor there too. But
That was the day it snowed. It was April 9th, and it snowed 3 inches in the morning, so we had to go over to church.
That's right. But anyway, I'm so grateful to all of you for including me in as your family, because it filled a void that I carry throughout my life, and I thank you for letting me come here. Now, I'll try to do this quickly here. Okay, as you all know, I wrote this book, Daddy Came Home. I called it Daddy Came Home because if Daddy didn't come home, I wouldn't be here, because I was born in '49. So we're going to fast forward here to arriving home. And this comes from the book. Arriving back to hometown Pitcairn. Now Pitcairn's over by Monroeville, in case any of you don't know. Even though my dad arrived home on October 28, 1945, his official end of service was June 12, 1946. This meant he spent 11 months and 26 days in the continental United States and 4 years and 13 days on foreign soil. My dad and Clem Troy, who's another man from Pitcairn that was also a POW, they were given a parade, which I'd hear the guys didn't want it, but they gave it to him anyway. I can only imagine the excitement in the air in my hometown. I can only imagine, I'm going to repeat it. However, like most World War II soldiers, they never liked to talk about their ordeal. I, personally, am thankful that our local newspaper, the Pitcairn Express, was able to get first-hand accounts from my dad pertaining to his ordeal. And I brought this, so you know I'm not just talking here. I brought a copy of the newspaper here. It stated what my dad said, and then Clem Troy, who also was a POW with my dad. If I wrote this book and didn't have that, it's useless. So I'm very thankful that I have that. The details that I write about come directly from the article, which is Life as a Prisoner of the Japs by Earl E. Lochner, dated November 15, 1945. Now, when my dad first got home, he came in by train. And I'm a photographer by trade, retired, but photographer, so I feel pictures tell more than words. So bear with me. This is a picture that was taken by the Post-Gazette. This was when my dad saw my brother for the very first time. Now, I don't know if you remember from last week when I said when my dad flew out of Pittsburgh, or left Pittsburgh, they did not know when he left to go over to the Philippines that my mom was pregnant. And when my dad was missing in action, that's when she had my brother Earl. So this is the actual picture, and this picture touches my heart so much because you can see the emotion in my dad's eyes, and my mother's too, being able to see his son. My brother was 3.5 years old at the time, and this was in the Post-Gazette. So let's move on life goes on. We talked last week. How many people come back from these ordeals and you have to, life goes on, whether you went through all this or not. As my dad tried to adjust back to normal life, he became very involved in the fire company number 2. He became its president. He also drove the ambulance for the community. He also was involved with the VFW, the Eagles, the American Legion. He loved to play cards and drink beer. Okay. Bear with me because I got lots of pictures here and everything, so I want to skim through. Almost 3 years goes by, and it was time for my mom and dad to welcome their daughter, me, May 7th, 1949. Since my mom named my brother Earl Douglas, unfortunately, after Douglas MacArthur, it was my dad's turn to name me. And of course, everybody knows me by Peggy, but Margaret is my real name, and that's my grandmother, my dad's mother's name. Now, he was also trying to name me after my grandpa, my pop-up, but his name was Clyde, but what they came up with was Claudette. So I got, because you could see a little baby, Margaret Claudette Lochner, little tiny baby with a big name. But anyway, but on a sad note, let's see, my mom told me this, that whenever she told my dad that she was pregnant, my dad said to her, "Whose is it?" So from what I've understood, there was a rough time there between my mom and dad after my dad came home. So all my life, I've wondered this. Now my brother, who is now deceased, he always teased me. He was 7 years older than me, and he always teased me, and he'd say to me, "Mom and Dad were afraid to tell you, but you were adopted." And I'm thinking, uh-oh. Well, make a long story short, I became the caretaker to my brother, and he ended up in a nursing home in Turtle Creek. And I thought, I'm going to prove this one way or another before he's gone or I'm gone, whether I'm really adopted or not. So I went and got DA testing. So I go down to the nursing home and I said, "Okay, brother." He couldn't speak because his stroke had paralyzed him and he couldn't speak. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to prove this one way or another, that you're really my brother and that I'm really supposed to be in this family." So the first DNA test we did, you have to spit in the little thing. Well, because he had the stroke, he couldn't spit. And I thought, oh my, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I said, okay, I'll figure something else out. So I went back and got another DNA kit, which was the swabbing of the cheek. So I go down, "Brother, I'm going to find this out one way or another. Open your mouth." So he was cooperative. Did the swabbing, sent it away, and I came back with the results. I said, "I'm sorry to tell you, you're stuck with me. I am your sister." But it was a big relief to me because that haunted me my whole life. And then especially when my mom said my dad questioned whether I was his. So that's just a little thing, but now I know I am Earl Lochner's daughter. Anyway, in my book I have a picture of my family. We would go to Colonial Beach. For the longest time I never understood this, because anybody that goes on a summer vacation, you're hot. My dad, if you see in this picture, he has his t-shirt on, but he has it rolled up. I could never figure out why that was until I became older and I learned how the undertaker had said he was the most brutalized body that he had ever had. So what he was doing here was protecting us from seeing all those stripes and stuff that was on his back there. A great childhood memory of mine was I'd go to the Pitcairn High School auditorium for their minstrel. Now you can't tell many people now about minstrels, but if you remember what the minstrels, they were fun. It wasn't, but my dad, first of all, my papa was the Mr. Interlocutor, who was the one who guided everything along with the music and everything. My dad would dress up like a female. And one was a hula girl, and another he dressed up. But there's a picture in my book of my pop-up and my dad dancing. So as I look back, because my dad died when I was 7, as I look back, my dad had to have a good personality. And he had to be fun-loving. And he had to be that. Because anybody that would dress up and dance with your dad in a female's outfit, they had to be something else. Another great memory of my dad, he worked for the post office. He was a delivery truck deliverer. One day, I was little. As you see, I have very straight hair. One day I had gotten a permanent. And when you get permanent, especially back in those days, real curly and everything. My dad was so proud of me. He threw me in the delivery truck and took me around and showed me off. The next day I woke up straight as a poker again. Okay, so I want to share this picture. This is the last picture I have. This is a picture of my dad is 40, my mom is 38, my brother is 7, and my brother is 14, and I am 7. 2 weeks after this picture is when my dad died. And I have to laugh because there's his cigarette right there by his finger there. So I cherish this picture. I remember my grandmother taking this picture. My dad complained and complained. She said, no, we have to get this. Well, I'm so thankful because 65 years later, I have this picture. Okay, so then we move on, and I'll try to move quickly. On that fateful day of October the 6th, 1956, my dad had driven me up to my grandma and pop-up's house to stay overnight. Nothing out of the ordinary, but later on, this day would change my life forever. This is the story. After my mom arrived home from playing bingo and Daddy from the Eagles, he complained that he had indigestion. The usual remedy during that time was mixing baking soda and water and drinking it, and it would provide relief. However, it did not help my dad, so living around the corner from Dr. Backus, my mom called him and he told them to come right over. This is in the middle of the night. They walked over and Dr. Backus gave him an EKG, checked him over and said everything seemed good. They walked back home, and as my mom was changing her clothes in the bathroom, she heard a gurgling sound coming from where my dad was lying. When seeing the situation, my mom called the doctor and the ambulance attendant who lived upstairs from us in an apartment. Many people worked on my dad, but to no avail. He died of the massive coronary, and we were told if there had been 100 people around my dad, they couldn't have helped him, because basically what happened is because he had beriberi and a lot of the other things, his heart blew out. There was nothing they could have done. Now, my dad was 40 years old and 12 days. I remember his birthday. They said, life begins at 40, Earl. He said, I don't know if that's going to be true or not.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 weeks later is when he passed. Now, this will give you a little chuckle. My memories of that night included me upstairs at my grandparents' house. I was awakened by all this crying downstairs. As I listened carefully, I heard Earl had died. At the age of 7, with a crazy brother, I thought in my head, if I had to choose which Earl they're talking about, would it be my dad or my brother? From my 7-year-old mind, I decided I wanted it to be my brother. Finally, I came downstairs to my papa. He took me in the kitchen, he put me on his lap, and he told me that my daddy had gone to heaven. I can't even imagine how hard it was for him to tell this heartbreaking news. So here my mom was 38 years old, my brother 14, and I was 7, and my mother had to plan the funeral. My memories are very vivid standing next to the casket. We were lined up a certain way, and we had to shake and smile for everybody that came around. I especially remember a flower arrangement designated a ladder on a broken run from the fire department that he served so well. The day of the funeral was intense. At 7 years old, I didn't understand what was going on. They didn't tell me to prepare for a full military funeral, for the guns, for the taps, and all that. And to this day, at 73 years old, when I hear those taps, it still breaks my heart to this day. Now, I'll touch lightly on this. So after my dad died, we lived on Social Security and VA benefits. And one of the things was the American Legion came in to my mother and said, "We believe that Earl died from services connected. So we would like to pursue that for you to get services connected." My mom said, "Sure." So it passed in Pittsburgh, it passed in Harrisburg, but when it went to DC, they threw it out. That was the first slap in the face. But my mother, the dear, dear person that she was, she carried on and raised my brother and I. My mother did remarry to a stepfather when I was 10. He hated my brother. He used to throw things at my brother. It was not a good time. But he worked in a steel mill, so he had more money. So my mother was trying to take care of us by having more money in there. So to fast forward, I had told you before my dad had beriberi, and he had the other things too, which was there. You know, you all know all that stuff. But back when President Clinton was involved, it came down through the VA that anybody that had beriberi, they were finding that it built up tissue around the heart, causing coronary heart attacks. So I was advised to have my mother reopen her case. At that time, I had moved her from Pitcairn up to Grove City. So I went over to her and I said, "Hey, Mom, you want to open this up?" No. I said, "Mom, we're not caring about money. That's not the main thing here. We just want our government to say that my dad died from services connected." So my mom said, "Okay." So we went to the congressman, filled out all the forms, did everything we had to, and sent it off. 2 weeks later, my mom passed away. So time went on. I could care less about that at that time. It was probably a good year. I got the information back from the VA, and so I opened up the thing, and it said, "Your dad was a hero, your dad did this, your dad did this, and blah, 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 blah. But we're sorry, we can't reopen your case because my mom had remarried." Another slap in the face. If my mother had gotten those benefits, it would have entitled my brother and I to go on to school. It would have entitled for us to have more money, and maybe she never would have married my stepfather. I don't know. But you got to keep going in life. You can't let these things drag you down. I do have a picture in here of when I brought my mother back up to Grove City. Throughout my whole life, I have tried to get his medals and awards that he was deserving of. And of course, I got him the Bronze Star. I've got him the POW. That's right, I did bring them. I don't know, any of you never saw it. I have one here. But anyway, I've tried my whole life to contact other POWs, to interact, to find out a little more about what my dad went through. So we did get the POW medal, and that's my mother sitting there with my youngest son, Todd, when we received the POW medal, which I think it's interesting, where it's an eagle surrounded by barbed wire. There was a big write-up in the paper, and it said, "POW gets recognition, 36 years too late." Throughout my years, I've been in different business organizations, and whenever they needed a speaker, they would ask me to come. And here's my two sons a long time ago, Ryan and Todd. I would make them come and listen. I said, you need to know what your grandpap went through. Now I have two granddaughters, and I'm working on them too. But anyway, let me move on here. Throughout my life, I've had many opportunities that I can talk about my dad. It's been 65 years since he passed, and I can still share his story. And I'm proud to tell everybody about my dad, my hero. By writing this book, I mainly wanted to get his story out, since once I am gone, all his history and memories is going to be gone. Of course, I wanted his family to know, which of course are his children, which is my brother who's now passed, his name Earl, me, grandchildren Darlene, who we raised, who has already met him in heaven, Marcy, Cindy, Earl, Kathy, Ryan, and Todd, and his grandchildren, Kaylee, T, Caden, Caleb, Peyton, and Paisley. They're my two grandkids. And a great-great-grandson, Mason, who has already met him in heaven. Many years ago, I'm almost done, many years ago, it was very important to me to have a plaque put on my dad's headstone. It reads, Bataan Death March, POW, Japan. Bataan Death March, POW, Japan. I applaud his bravery, as he was one of the greatest generations. He will always remain my hero. And whenever I hear the song, You Are My Sunshine, I will always think of him. This book is to honor him, my dear Daddy, until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.